Awesome. Welcome to another episode of A Podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted. And today we have Stefan joining us with Flatout Solutions.
Yep.
And we had just been on the other side of your business and the podcast recently. We're excited to have you on here to chat more about where things are at today and, chat a little bit about the podcasting journey as a whole for both of us, perhaps. So, Stefan, I know a little bit more about your story. Why don't you start off by sharing that with the audience here today?
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me. So we talked a couple of weeks ago, I think, or I don't know, I'm lost in
Yeah,
time, maybe.
I don't know.
Same
Yeah,
with other people. Hopefully it's not just me. But so my journey, I'm, as you can hear from the accent, I didn't grow up on this continent. So I'm from Austria, came to the US, and it took me like 3 years to get here between 2015 and 18, which is always easy when you work on computers, right? Um, don't have to be anywhere. I was mostly an employee, but I've always wanted to do my own thing. I just never knew how to market IT. So my background is in software engineering and IT generally, consulting. So last year got laid off. So the decision was kind of made for me, which I'm not mad about that at all. So I've been doing my own thing now, kind of between business coaching and marketing right now, more towards marketing, but going forward, probably a combination of both. And just doing the entrepreneur thing now. I wish I had done it sooner, but I was in my comfort zone, and I'm hoping that maybe somebody out there is watching who's also in their comfort zone who gets out of it soon, because it's fun. I mean, it's sometimes exhausting, but generally, obviously it depends who you are, but I think it's fun. I prefer this lifestyle to be more responsible and in control of what's happening. So thanks for having me out here.
No, for sure. I think you nailed it too. We should just dive right into that. When you were in like a job before, what were the things that made you stick around or not consider going out on your own at the time?
Well, so for me, especially transitioning from Austria to the US, which in Austria, people still use Google and Facebook and Amazon, right? So the money leaves the country. And then also, just economy-wise and education-wise, in Austria, like my software engineering degree was like $2,000 for the whole thing, whereas here it'd be like 200 grand maybe, right? I don't know. So I think the supply and demand when it comes to IT experts is very different in Austria, right? There's a lot of more people with that education because it doesn't require that kind of investment as here. And then there's way less demand, right? All the Googles, Facebooks, Apples, whatever, that's all here, right? So more supply, less demand. So when I came here, I overnight tripled my salary already. And then coming up to 22, hiring was crazy. I feel like IT companies or software companies, they just hired people so nobody else could hire them. So, in the end, I think within a couple of years, I basically did a 6 or 7x of my salary from what it was in Austria, which I wasn't starving in Austria, right? But so that I'm pretty sure led to some kind of comfort zone. You're not just doing good, you're doing above average, right? But also you can't scale, right? You're still selling your time for money, and time's limited. So I did, now as it's over, I can say that I did work. I was kind of one of those overemployed people for a while, because one of the projects was kind of just running steadily and it was getting boring, so I just took on another job, and then I was even more comfortable, right? Because now you're kind of getting paid. I wasn't getting paid like twice, but 1.5 times. So, you're comfortable. You can pretty much do a lot more than other people can do, but I still wasn't satisfied, right? So, I wasn't doing my own thing. And then also in those bigger IT companies, I feel like at least that's my experience in IT. Either companies, they do something cool, but they don't have money. I haven't found this like cool startup that has, a couple tens of millions and is doing something cool. So for me, it's either they do something cool but they don't have money, or they have money but they don't do anything cool, right? It's a bank or something, and it's like making something boring a little less boring, but still boring. So I wasn't happy with what I did in a day, in a week. I just didn't see that needle in a bank moves very, very slowly, right? It takes years for change to happen. So, but I just enjoy things changing quickly. So that's what led me to wanting to work with smaller businesses, with the business coaching, because they're, the needle that can move really fast if you make a difference, right? Especially if you show so many new perspectives. And so that was really fun. So
awesome. No, I think that totally makes sense, right? Where there is that pendulum where usually anyways, I think I've been in maybe a very unique situation where they were doing cool stuff and they were well funded for a brief period of time in one of my ag tech companies I'd worked with. But that is so true though. The safer things are fairly well funded, but they're a little bit more safe
right.
and kind of boring. I hate to use the B word maybe, but less on their toes. There's maybe less things to be innovative or restrictions within the space itself, right? I mean, if you're in the financial sector, there's a bunch of limitations on what kind of marketing strategies you can use, what you're doing. And I've heard the same thing in the law industry as well, depending on your geography, what you're allowed to do for advertising different things. So very interesting to note that. And then, the places where you're having the most fun, you're making a little bit less. And there's not really the budgets. You have to be creative to stay alive. On those ones. So I mean, that totally makes sense to me. And I, just to compare quickly on my end, I say the same thing, like I was with some larger agriculture companies and maybe not the same growth right away, but I had the same experience where I got let go through a merger. That was the first time I've been fired on that one. And, we talked about this a little bit prior to, but, very challenging time to go through as the first time. I don't envy anyone going through that experience, but after I went through it once, so it was less of a big deal in a way. But then after that, I kind of auto gave myself a couple raises just from shifting companies and folks thinking actually locally here that you were making more than you were at the time. So to be competitive against other companies, to your point there around like competitiveness in different industries, it was very interesting to live through that and then look back on it and be like, oh, what was I stressed about? This worked out great, but you don't have the crystal ball to see, what's going to come from that either through that, getting fired phase in any company situation. So
yeah,
I mean, there's lots of jobs.
Especially in IT, a couple of, like 5 years ago, it was like, nobody ever got laid off or anything, right? Like you jump from company to company.
Right.
Generally, I don't know, that's a trend I've seen at least. You don't get a raise usually. You get the raise when you quit and start working somewhere else. But you're getting laid off, and like, I don't know, nobody got laid off, right, 5 years ago. But now with all the things that economy is doing, plus I'm pretty sure AI and also offshore, right? I mean, there's lots of smart people all over the world. So all of that plays into that. So now finally, people who were never even thinking of getting laid off are now getting laid off, and some of them are starting businesses, which is exciting. So I feel like we're generally in that trend of everybody nowadays has a side hustle. It feels like, right? Nobody's just kind of doing their one job and that's it, right? So many people do something on the side, and then suddenly the side thing becomes the main thing, and vice versa. So
totally.
I think it's exciting, and that's also comparing to Austria, maybe, right? That's a perspective I can bring here. In Austria, you need to start something the equivalent of an LLC. You need 30 grand cash, right? I think now they have something like it's called LLC Light, I think. But you still need thousands of dollars to start an LLC. Comparing that to, I don't know how it's in Canada, but here in the US, it's $85 to start an LLC, and then you're good to go, right? So, so in Austria, to start a company, you need to have, and it's not like that money, it's not like you pay that money, right? But you need to put that money in the company because they don't, and that whole online industry, that boom isn't there so much in Austria. A lot of that happens here, right? So, but they just want you to have money to run the company. Whereas here, you start with $85 and it doesn't matter if you have them or not. You just put them on a credit card and now you're starting out and you do stuff, right? And then you succeed or fail or make mistakes and learn and then keep going. So that's a different mindset in Austria. It's not like everybody and their grandma start a company, right? It's a more serious endeavor. So
yeah, that's an interesting perspective. So the concept is that you'd already have money like sitting there to use to run the company.
yeah, exactly. So again, you're not, it's not like you pay that money, right? But you have to put that money in the company, and then I think there's some. Don't ask me, right? There's some restrictions what you can do and what you can't just put the money in and then take it out again. You have to use money for the company, right? Which I guess that's a more traditional way of thinking. But for an online company, let's say you start a marketing company, right? Where are you going to buy? I mean, you don't need that front capital, right? So I think it's a bit outdated of a concept, but and that's why the startup community just isn't that big there. Sure, there's a community, but it's not like everybody has a side hustle like here. So, and of course, it's not everybody, but a lot of people.
Right. Yeah, less frequent. Well, that's very interesting. I had no idea that existed, but it definitely would be a limiting way to get in there. I've started a few in the last couple of years. Some which have failed and have been shut down since. But you're right. Like the barrier to entry was not big to go register a name, go through that process up in here in Canada. Like at first you register the name. I think it's like $40 now, maybe 45, and then depending on what kind of company you want to register, a few $100 to do a corp. So I'll see. I'm going to get this wrong for our local province here, and then the partnership or sole proprietor is less than that, but it's still maybe like $100 to do any of them. And then after that, depends how serious you want to write up your corporate structure. You can, get legal help within that space if you would like. To structure it in different ways, right? If you have partners and different things like that, you're probably going to want to do that. If it's just your own, then that's not advice on this, by the way. If anyone's listening, that's just how it can be done. Of course, you should seek more help there, but yeah, a little bit different for sure, because even from the borrowing perspective, like after doing it with one company, then the second, more committed company that I had personally launched, the financing piece of it in terms of like what the bank would give me right out of the gates was a lot more borrowing right away. It was like that, and it was more like 50 grand for right, and then just how do you want it? So it's like the opposite of what your experience there, where you have to like save up and then go and do it. But that only happened after running a company. You build up, very good credit behind some of that stuff too. It doesn't happen for everyone like that, but there are always, seems to be in the business community here and local Canada, always lots of lending available, right? So yeah.
And as you mentioned that, I think generally the happiness to do everything on borrowed money, I think that's also a bit, at least from my perspective, which my Austria knowledge is now outdated, right? It's almost 10 years since I've actually done something there, right? Other than just being on vacation. So, but the willingness to, because here you would be like, okay, I need 20 grand to start a business. Okay, let's see where I can get the 20 grand. I'll get them somewhere, right? Pretty much nowadays here, you're totally almost homeless, right? You can get 20 grand from anywhere, right? And then, if you need 20 grand to start a business, you'll find them somewhere. Even, in a business, if you're going to make money, maybe you'll just put it on a credit card or whatever. That is kind of a question how confident you are. But the mentality, and of course we have a debt problem, right? So that's a different story, and I'm not a financial expert, but I can see that. But in Austria, the mentality is more like, okay, you want to buy something, okay, save up for it, and then you buy it outright. Well, with a business, I would, of course, sometimes maybe that makes sense, but in a business, I mean, there's good debt and bad debt, right? Obviously, if you put your vacation that you can't afford on a credit card, not that good of idea. But if you put your business idea, if you're confident, if the idea makes sense, if you put that on a card, I would totally, if I needed 20 grand to start a business, put it on a card and make the money, so borrow money to make money. And I feel like that mindset, I haven't seen that so much in Austria, right? It's more like, okay, need 20 grand. Okay, maybe I can start like next year and let's start saving up, which maybe at that point somebody else has already had the same idea and now you're
and gone with it.
Right? So when it comes to speed to market, just get the money somewhere. I prefer the mentality here, which of course there's downsides too when people spend money they don't have on something that doesn't make money, but borrowing money to make money, just go for it. That's kind of my mentality, and I feel like that's also a good measurement how confident are you in your idea, right? Because if I'm ready to borrow 20 grand with 30% interest for a business idea, then that's a good confirmation that I'm confident in the idea, right? If I'm not willing to pay interest on the money to try out my idea, maybe it's not that good, right? So I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. So
Totally. Yeah, it would definitely make you think about that risk way more if you had to save up for it getting into it. But like that being said, a discussion from earlier today even was with an entrepreneur around like their startup cost for their company initially was like 2 grand or under 2 grand. It was in a partnership. So let's say that is a 50,000 bucks each. Not as much risk as taking out like an entire loan for a lump sum or having that done into the company as far as that goes, because you're kind of committed then to that being in the company, understanding that what they're trying to do there's kind of be safer with it, right? So you're not caught with a lot of costs where you're in a weird spot there. But yeah, it's kind of interesting to consider different growth patterns and strategies within there. You want to get started, but not take on a bunch of risk where you're going to have nothing, after it, kind of thing. Or depends on what the thing is you're investing in. Is it so specific you could never offload it? I remember with like a rental company I started a few years ago, I was debating getting more kayaks, and a guy in our cycling group said to me, he's like, "Well, what's the worst case? You buy them, someone will buy them from you if you need to sell them. They're very popular item here with lots of cottages and stuff." And ironically, when I kind of like scaled back that piece of that business, that was the first thing to go was the kayaks. And I remembered him saying that in my head. I was like, oh, yeah, good point. Yeah, they did sell pretty quick again if I didn't need them. So yeah, it kind of depends, I guess, on the specific situation, but very interesting to, yeah.
Yeah, I think in business and well, also in other areas of life, and I'm definitely more on the I don't have enough fear. So I've had an accident here and there and mountain biking, and you fall off this cliff, whatever. So there it would
Yeah.
probably have been better to be a little more fearful and have a little more
Yeah.
respect for what's happening. But I think in business you just got to be willing to take some risks. Is it taking a loan? Is it you figure something out, right? If you're, again, for me it's a good measurement. If you're ready to take some risk, maybe it's going to work, right? The chances are higher that it's going to work. And if you don't take any risk, somebody else is going to take that risk. And if the
Totally.
idea is good for them. If the idea isn't that great, then maybe you were right to be a little more fearful. But and then it's also, I always ask the question, what if, right? Let's say you take a 20 grand
Totally.
loan, and obviously it depends on your situation, but for me it was like, okay, you can blow 20 grand or even more, right? What if, right? What's going to happen, right? How much is the lesson worth, right? You can also spend 50
Totally.
grand on a couple coaching programs. So I would rather start my own thing, lose my own money, and then learn
Right.
and then obviously don't the saying is that if you do the same thing again hoping for a different outcome, that's insanity. Right? So but learn
Totally.
from mistakes and just learn from that. So you could spend 20, 30, 50 grand on a coaching program, or I would rather make my own mistakes, waste my own money or spend it on life lessons, and then know how to not do it, and then move on. And at some point, if you pay attention, if you learn, and if you're open to learning, and if you don't repeat the same mistakes, something's gonna work, right? So that's that what if question. I like that, and I feel like that makes life so much easier. A lot of times, we get kind of stuck in kind of getting angry or frustrated, whatever, and then you're like, well, what if it's gonna could be worse.
Totally.
So I feel like in business sometimes take some risks, right? Risks get rewarded. So
100%.
how's that for you? What kind of
No,
risks
that's
you take? And then
totally, yeah, I totally agree with that. Like that balancing act of exactly that. And I think when we were getting in, starting some companies in the past myself, and um, it builds up your risk tolerance as well, though. So you start to look at that a little bit differently and understand whatever that thing is that you're investing in, whether that be yourself to take a course or um, a product or service to help your business run better. I I hesitate less now to invest in things that are kind of like no-brainers. I'm like, okay, this is going to save this much time every month or week from the software. Um, Something as simple as upgrading my desk recently seems silly, but I was like, why am I even debating $150 purchase when it's kind of affecting my posture while I sit here? And part of it's from leaning, I just kind of get into these like calls, like quite literally just caught myself doing it. But it's one of those things where I was just like looking at like where the screens can be and where I can mount different things within that $150 purchase. It's so crazy for me to debate that, that I'm like, just do it. It's going to be easier when it gets here. You'll feel better. So smaller things like that, where I'm just like, okay, I think it makes a lot of sense, even if there is no like direct ROI from that item right away. Different softwares for editing that we use, or scheduling apps for content on that side, such as Canva, something that saves time on the content side, or creating visuals. Initially, when you're getting into this thing, you're like, oh, I'll get the free version and see what it can do a little bit for me. And I'm nervous about making that purchase. And I'm not coming from a place of like, we have money to just burn on these things. It's very strategic when we are doing the upgrade. But I've almost kind of seen enough of the benefits from going for the higher package within those programs now to be like, okay, what's offered in like the top one and how much better is it than that baseline one? Because obviously the people, hopefully in many cases, that have designed these softwares, have made like, the big advantages to be in that very highest bracket of offering. Maybe it's a little excessive, maybe we don't need it at the time. So just evaluating, what are our needs and what is really necessary, because some of like the commercial versions of products too are a little bit too far. It's like, we're not that big and it doesn't make sense to drop thousands on the thing, but we'll do like the $100 upgrade right away because it's like, of course, that makes sense. So that's a little bit more where my risk, I guess, like is now. And then even, we mentioned like AI. This is a very interesting one actually. Dive into if that's okay. But someone who just joined our team on the marketing side, they actually got let go from Shopify. Won't use names, whatever. But great person, met them. I'm like, what happened like with the other job? I don't know if we're supposed to ask that on interviews either. But they got replaced with AI bot. Their whole like area got replaced with like AI, and I was like, that's really unfortunate. But fortunately, we still need people with my company growth right now, and we'd love to have you on board. Was pretty much the next thing that came out of my mouth, and what they described for their experience, because we work on the back end of websites and stores, and they're just so fluent. So because of some of those situations that do occur from the AI thing, I think there's lots of opportunity for people to get talent within that space. And then you want to talk about risk and investing in folks furthermore, and it is kind of back to you about how to manage growing a team. But I see it as like just a huge asset now to us. We have someone with years of experience that we were able to work with now to join our team. So, but how do you view stuff like that yourself, Stefan, for growing the team and taking that risk with folks joining after being let go? Because I think about it a lot differently now. I'm like, I want to make sure it's a healthy place and we can facilitate growth here too. I don't want it to be boring for them on the flip side, is kind of how I look at it. But what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think generally, especially coming out of big tech companies, right? There was a lot of comfort, and I think it's actually good for the mentality of people who work there, right? Because again, 5 years ago, it was like, all right, we'll never get laid off, we'll have this job forever. Again, it was always the thing: if you want to make more money, you got to quit your company and work somewhere else. But and I think that also kind of, to some people, probably myself too, it kind of got to people. You get kind of, on the one side, you're stuck in your comfort zone, right? So you don't really, if you're gonna make like 300-400K a year and you don't have to really learn anything new, that's bad for you, and that's bad for your customers, that's bad for your company, that's bad for everybody, right? So last I worked for Amazon, and there I got to say there's a pretty good culture of continuously learning, but there's companies, people are stuck in their jobs, they do the same thing all the time, you don't learn anything, but you're making 200-400K a year, right? So it's like, why would you
quit?
Effort? Why would I go through that course in my free time if I'm good, right? I'm comfortable, I have my house, and I don't have any money problems, and but I think it's good for people. Now it's like, okay, try a little harder, learn this new thing, because I feel like nowadays nobody's safe, right? And all those safe big tech jobs, they're not safe, and being not being safe, that's good, right? It's kind of like, if
Definitely.
you're out in the wild and you feel safe, maybe something's going to eat you, right? So in that case, now I feel like it's more like you're okay. I'm surrounded by uh, tigers or whatever, so maybe
Totally.
good to kind of invest in your personal safety a bit, or when it comes to business, just learn something, right? Learn something new, do something different. I feel like also, it's doing the exact same thing for like 30-40 years. At some point you're just not gonna do anything new,
Yeah.
and then you're gonna get kind of blind to mistakes, right? You're gonna do the same thing over and over. So, and I have those colleagues, I
Yeah.
still talk to them, they've been in software for 30 years, and it's like, all right, and you're always you're also in your group of people, right? Software engineers, they tend to not like marketing, not like sales, they don't like managers, right? You're just like,
Yeah.
it's like only your own people are the good ones and everybody is the bad one. So for me, it's really interesting now to be on the other side, right? I was one of the people that was
Right.
like, oh, the sales guy, they always lie to customers, they sell something that doesn't exist, or they don't understand how it works. Now it's interesting to be on sales calls myself and be like, oh, it's not that easy. It's not like you lie to the customer and that's it, and then you make the sale. It's there's a lot more that goes into that. Same with marketing, right? And for me now, I enjoy the fusion of marketing and tech, right? Because nowadays it's not like
Yeah.
marketing is just marketing and customer psychology, but there's a lot of tech involved, right? And it's kind of funny because there's things probably software engineers would also have to read up on it, how to do this marketing thing, right? Because there's a lot of tech involved that as a software
Totally.
engineer, you're kind of at the higher level of technical skill and understanding, they would also not know, right? So there's just a lot of,
Yep.
so there's marketing people, they know more in some tech areas than other tech people. So that's kind of interesting. So, but to answer your question, the first thing I was enjoying is when hiring, was kind of hire somebody who does the things that I don't have time for, or they're just not important enough. But somebody, for me, it's really about focus, right?
Yeah.
Torn between 100 different things every day. And I've always
Yeah.
had that even back in, working for companies. It was always like, there's somebody who deals with all the chaos and the madness, right? With multiple clients and whatever. And then there's
Yep.
other people they enjoy and they have the capability of focusing, right? And
Totally.
I've never taken an ADHD test, but I'm pretty sure I do pretty good in terms of totally having it, right? So I enjoy being
Yeah.
all over the place, and multitasking, or living in the illusion of multitasking. And then, so I think there's always a good symbiosis between somebody like me and then somebody who enjoys focusing, right? And they focus and they just get stuff done. And then it's not just kind of half done like I do, right? But then it's like actually done, right? All different scenarios are thought through, and they've tested everything, or done whatever they need to do to say, yeah, this is done, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done, not really. Maybe it works, and then, so I always enjoy that symbiosis. And then, if somebody is that kind of person who enjoys focusing and they enjoy figuring out all the different scenarios and on all of that, that's rewarding for them too. And they would hate to do what I do, and I
Right.
would hate to do what they do. So kind of a win-win. And when that works really well, when I start something, then I hand it off to somebody, and then they show me what they've done with my idea, and I'm like, oh, yep, that would have totally not worked, and then they figured it out. That's super rewarding for both of us, right? So
Oh, I totally agree. And something, sorry, you saw my eyes drift off here. I had to look it up because I heard this the other day about ADD, as I'm literally demonstrating that I am kind of. But there is a higher percentage of folks who get into business that has to do with like risk tolerance as well, who have ADD, and they'd be too set in one thing, and they often don't like it. Is basically what I'm seeing here on this like short thing. But they prefer like more risky or high percentage of folks with ADHD among entrepreneurs, more than salaried employees would fall into the category of having ADD, or a little attention jumping all over the place. I think it's part of the role of like really juggling a business, though, is why it probably is more fitting, because you're never just doing, like you said, like kind of like set tasks. Although sometimes my mind wanders to be like, Oh, the safety net, so say I have like a job and getting paid the same thing every 2 weeks would be for sure really nice. But I know that, that comes with limitations. Like what is the incentive? What is the upside within that role too?
Oh,
I think one of the best things for organizations to look at is some kind of like incentive structure to make it interesting on those big wins or successes, whatever that looks like. Maybe it's some kind of reward for the team that comes with some risks too, right? For the class project style energy. Once someone, pulls everyone else forward, but if everyone can kind of get some kind of reward, I'd say some of the highest performance I've done within other companies is where there was a very effective incentive program, very easy to understand, um, clear communication, and paid out frequently. That was actually a bigger one for me that I kind of hit home. It was like you got paid the next month. This one company, when you hit different like goals versus once a quarter, which I have seen done before, or like the once a year one. I think that's so dated in terms of like incentives or bonuses, unless it has to be that way. But I do feel like that is such an older mentality, because you'd also see folks leave after that time period. They'd wait around for that section of time right after the year end, versus like if you're getting paid more frequently, there's less of a reason to leave unless you're really not hitting it, or
yeah,
if you get let go, I guess, if you're really not performing in general, because you can get canned for not actually doing your job. But sometimes you get let go for other reasons, someone else's error, mistake,
yeah,
or downsizing of the company, right? So it's
yeah.
not as straightforward as it used to be.
Right, and the most annoying thing I observed was that, oh, we did great, but somebody else had a loss and they lost a couple deals, so now
Right.
you're not getting the bonus either. It's like,
Yeah.
that feels kind of like in prison,
Ah,
right? One person screws up, and then the entire everybody gets punished.
everyone on the team.
Kind of like that
Yeah.
happened to me too, and then yeah, I've totally seen people leave in those phases, right? So they actually did get a bonus, but it wasn't as big as they thought it was going to be, and
Yeah.
they're gone. So and I mean that's just I feel like as an employer, and obviously now we have the benefit of not being a $10 or $100,000 employee company, so it's a little more flexible. So we just do that if we sell a big deal, everybody gets a bonus. There's no like big
Yeah.
calculations, and the CFO comes in and whatever. It's just like,
Totally.
all right, we got some money. Let's throw some of it around just because we can. So and that motivates people again, right? It's really not just about the money. It's just, and you could say it's some employees maybe would say, okay, it's unfair. Where does the business owner get all the money? But then you could also ask them, hey, do you want to be the business owner? And then maybe
Right.
not. It's it comes with a lot of pros, but a lot of hurdles and
For sure.
too, right? So
Yeah.
um
That's an interesting one though too, for sure, where like you get to a stage where you're growing it and you kind of feel like you are, as the employee, like more um entitled to more of the pie, which definitely I get where that's coming from. But now being in like the other seat or like driving the bus, I'm like, oh, I could see why. I mean, like we're taking risks. You're seeing the bank account sometimes go down with investing in other things. I'll call it investing or taking risks on. And then that there is going to be, or might be, the return on that. But until that does come back,
mm,
then you're out that money. Maybe you're having more, the analogy is always, eating like pasta or stuff for a little bit to make that get by, perhaps in that time frame. So, and I know people manage that in different ways. I know initially taking risks to me was it definitely stressed me out, for sure. But then over time, you kind of get a little bit more comfortable with it. You're like, okay, like this will pay off. You get more patient with it. You realize like the length of time needed for that ROI you maybe just need more time to have that be effective. Maybe you didn't do it for long enough or intense enough, on those different areas. So maybe that's why you haven't seen that return yet, ultimately. But um, yeah, it's interesting to look at after the fact, though, for sure. You know, uh, hindsight's 2020 on that all the way through. But what's something that you've invested in yourself, Stefan? I often have heard this with
oh yeah.
folks, is that the best investment is themselves. What's something that you have done, or what's something that's coming up on your radar that you're investing in yourself for? I'm sure that there's something here.
Yeah, I've turned a bunch of money around since, obviously when I got laid off last year, I kind of did all the finances, and I was like, okay, this is how much money I have. So I think I did some math. I was like, okay, if I don't do anything, I survive until I think it was some like 2027 or something. I was like, okay,
Cool.
I got some, because I have a house that doesn't cost me because stuff is rented out and whatever. So
Yeah.
can otherwise, because there was people, they got laid off and they were like, okay, if I don't have a job in 2 months,
Yeah.
I'm filing for bankruptcy kind of thing, right? I mean, some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
got really, really comfortable during or after COVID when you get paid twice as much as the last year, and now you start spending twice as much.
Yeah.
Well, it's I don't know. I feel like it was a lot safer. It was a lot more steady, but especially 2022, 23, salaries jumped up and then they dropped to the basement. So it's kind of a bit of a gamble. I feel like everything nowadays is a gamble, right? Your bank account, gamble, right? Your salary, gamble, right? Your house, gamble, your car, gamble. Everything's a gamble, right? So you have to have
Totally.
some reserves on the side to be able to, and personally, and same in business, right? You can't just expect today's cash flow to be there tomorrow, because what if it isn't? Especially once you have people that employees or freelancers that rely on you to kind of sail the ship, and you can't just be out of money tomorrow. Now I think I lost it now, but what was your initial?
No, that's okay. We were talking about investing in yourself, or that was like
Right.
what I was originally in, but I'm so down with where you're going here if we want to continue on this track. But
No, to answer the question, so I invested in coaching programs. So I probably spent almost 100 grand in coaching in the last year, right? And
cool.
that money is gone, but now I'm in the phase where I have to earn that money back. But
Mm-hmm.
and actually I just started a new coaching program last year, which for me, that's kind of the combination of marketing and coaching. So
Right.
that's the growth partner business model, where you go into a company and you're not just like, okay, I'll run this ad campaign for you, or I'll do whatever marketing stuff for you, or I'll coach you and I'll just ask you questions so you figure out what
Right.
to do and then you do it. But a bit of a combination of both, right? And then you don't just talk about a little growth, but then you talk about massive growth. So I just started that last week, and super exciting. So and I
Nice.
if I had known that something like this exists, I probably wouldn't have done the coaching programs I spent money on last year. Because this
Right.
one, for example, they give you a success guarantee. If you don't see successes that are twice as much as the coaching program, you get all your money back. So last year I
Huh.
was like, okay, a coaching program is 25 grand. Cool, here's the money. Let's go, right? Let's hope for the best.
Right.
Now it's like, oh, those guys actually have accountability. And if I don't succeed, they don't succeed.
Right.
That's an interesting model. And now I'm also going to do that with my clients, right? So rather than telling somebody, I'll run your ad campaigns and that's how much it costs. And then if you succeed, great. If you don't, go find somebody else, right? It's more like, I'll do a revenue share. And then if they do well, I do well. But if they do really well, I do really well. And then, so that's kind of a model I'm following now. So super, super exciting, and just got started with that a couple of days ago. So
Very awesome. I really like hearing that too, in terms of like that being like a win-win, especially in the space
yeah,
of working with companies to help them grow along the way too. Because a lot of folks are hesitant around like that investment initially, like they're not really sure the outcome in many cases. Whereas I feel like we're almost getting there as well on the marketing side, where we're very confident on what we can produce, what that means for the client's long-term success, and then just kind of like proof in the pudding for a lot of folks that have stayed with us for longer periods of time now, because they've seen success from that, and it's become very evident. Just like, okay, like learning over time, though, what has worked, what will we do differently in the future, and then how do we, almost like you said though, guarantee that success. And it's great to hear that you have invested. What was one of the bigger takeaways from the coaching that you did take before that you said you wouldn't maybe take it now, but I'm sure that there was stuff from those courses that you had taken that you're like, okay, this has definitely helped out in this area of my business, or another area. What were some of the big takeaways or reminders that you had coming
yeah.
out?
One thing definitely, like I said, as back in software companies, there was like, okay, sales, all you do is lie to the customer, and then you get a big fat commission, and
Right.
good for you. But the coaching program last year was very heavy on sales. And then, I'm generally, as a person, I'm interested in psychology and how people's minds function. And I
Totally.
wasn't fully aware that, when it comes to sales, it's not just, here's an offer and here's the price, and I'll I'll lie to the customer and then I get the commission, right? There's a lot of psychology that goes into that. And also the business I purchased a couple of months ago, the previous owner, and we're now partnering for the transition phase. He's also a master salesperson, so I'm learning from him too, and it's very interesting. And it's almost embarrassing how much I underestimated sales before, because before it was like somebody else sells and I deliver, right, and then I have to figure out how to deliver the things that they lied to the customer about. And now it's more like, okay, how do I sell something? Obviously, I don't want to lie to the customer, but you still gotta paint a picture that the customer sees, so they see the potential of where they could be, or where the service or product could be. And another thing I also learned is, it's not just about having a good service or a good product, but it's about having a good offer, right? Same as, if you think about those, free trial software services, right? The product is there, but now, especially, if you think about, I don't know, something like Slack or so, right? They give you quite a lot for free, right? And I'm sure they have tons of companies out there. They never pay for Slack because they get all they need for free, right? But still that offer, it's like, in Slack, for example, if you want to collaborate with another company, well, now you got to pay, right? So
now you got to get in there. Yeah.
So I think that's where it's really not just about the product or the service, it's about the offer, right? Does the offer make sense? And sometimes I'm really impressed. Sometimes it's annoying because exactly that one thing that you want in addition to all the free stuff you get, that's part of the paid offer. But in the end, and that's kind of, if you're successful, now you can pay for software that helps you save time, and then that company's got to make money and pay their people too, right? So but that was my main takeaway about sales and forming an offer. So right now I'm in the process of finding out what's my new offer that I'm gonna offer, right? So super exciting.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I think that's so cool. Like, I mean, I've taken some training again this year for the first time ever, like invested in like myself full on in a course and had part of my team join in that as well, which was even more interesting, especially with little to no experience in like the sales and marketing side specifically. But I think one of the bigger things for myself was remembering to ask for the close. It's such a simple, easy thing, but that was one of my big ones. And I'm like, oh yeah, you kind of got out of that for a little bit. You never, I don't know. It was just like a weird thing that I pulled away from one of the meetings, and they didn't offer like a guarantee, but they did offer if you didn't have success in the time when you were doing the course, you'd get to take it again, basically. So offering it again to like go in. It was a different way to approach it. This gentleman was early on in his journey for the coaching side, but really getting into it. And I mean, there was lots of great things from the course itself, but my biggest thing was just like remembering to ask for the sale at the end, because people need to be like asked out on the date. So to say, it was like, okay, you've sold them on all this stuff, but you have to like inquire, be like, okay, let's move forward with this thing. People almost need to be asked to do so in a weird way, and you kind of turn your brain off to it. You get asked for stuff all the time on the reverse, and you're so used to hearing it that when it does come back to you, or you're saying it to someone else, it does actually feel very natural when you think about it. But then not being trained on it, it seems unnatural. And you're right. I mean, I come from a background in sales and marketing roles where we were doing that all the time. But if you take a couple of years off, you kind of forget that you're supposed to be asking for, okay, like let's exchange these things now. And if it's like a yes, then good. And if it's a no, then okay, well, like, well, what don't you need? What else do you need to know for information? If it's something that you're kind of wanting to move forward with, right? Often that's the case. Just more education on what the services are or how you explain it too within the mention of psychology and personality types. Very important. Some people will never buy from your style. That's why it's important to have other folks, be able to explain it and work with different people too, because it might not be a good match. I mean, that would be such a cool service to have actually on the sales side of things before you even get on the call. Like match your personality, which maybe it's going to happen one day, where they can kind of get you more, right? Offer more analytics for someone who thinks more like that, or different information about customer service if that's what that person needs. But
definitely. And another thing, I mean, one thing I think that a lot of people can do better, myself included for sure, is the follow-up, right? I've heard, I think as part of one of the coaching programs, somebody said that, they were the sales manager, and somebody called them. They were all annoyed, and they were like, I want to talk to management. And he was like, all right, here we go again. What did my guys do wrong again? And then the the lead, right, the customer or lead was like, so I'm really mad, like nobody followed up with me. I wanted to buy your product, but nobody followed up. And they were like, oh, so you just want to purchase? And they were like, yeah, but you never asked me. And he was like, oh, okay, well, I'll send you the invoice. And they were like, okay, cool. So you would think
isn't that funny?
if you're not in sales, you would think like, oh, I'm annoying somebody, right? Like, oh, getting followed up with is annoying. But some people, obviously it depends on, do you have the offer that solves their problem, right? But if your offer solves the problem, it's actually annoying for them if you don't follow up. It's kind of like maybe like, your doctor doesn't call you, right? And it's like, all right, I'm in pain here, but nobody calls me back, right? So it's kind of the same thing. Like, you solve some problem, you're doing them a service, right? I feel like if you're not in sales, you're always on the other side of sales. It's like, all right, I'm getting sold to, but it's like,
Totally.
you're solving somebody's problem, so you're doing them a service by selling them the service, right? And then the next thing is you're doing them a service by charging them, especially when it's stuff like courses, right? I think the statistics for courses sold are something like, out of 10 people, 8 never even log in one time, and then the remaining 2 people, one of them logs in and consumes the course, but doesn't do anything with it. And then the last person, 1 out of 10, that's the person who takes the course and then actually uses the knowledge and gets some advantage, right? So, and that's including, I didn't look at the specifics of that statistic, right? But I'm assuming that's included for all courses, right? So now, if you give something away for free or for too cheap, it's just too cheap. People didn't take it seriously, right? If you sell me a course right now for $29, I guarantee you I'll be one of the 8 that never log in, right? If you sell me a course for 10 grand, I'll be there, right? Because I'm like, well, it's too expensive to not consume, right? So I'll consume it. Hopefully I get value out of it, but that's a different question. But so it's a service to follow up with people. It's a service to sell them a solution to their problem. And it's a service to charge them enough so they take it seriously. So all of those things I feel like a salesperson knows that, but if you're always on the other side of sales, you don't know that. So that's interesting.
Totally. I've heard the same thing about courses. And I think the comment that I had heard, I might be misquoting here too, but was like, it needs to be $5,000 for the year, the course to be effective. That was like the sweet spot. And initially it does maybe seem like a lot, just because of the upfront cost. Depends how it is, like invoice and stuff like that. I don't know if it's a continual learning thing, but in this example at all. But the interesting thing was just like to look back on that and be like, okay, if it was divided amongst the year, how much does that go back to per month or per day, whatever it is. But you are going to make time when you made that investment, kind of like getting a personal trainer or other coaches for different things, right? They're there to help you do your sport. You'll see improvement in that. And if you can do the same thing within your business, that's where I think folks don't take that serious enough. I totally agree that. I think initially, like lower overhead, taking a little bit of risk, and then have a lot of energy behind it, great. But the consistency over time along with that risk is what's going to separate you from the herd on a lot of that stuff. And then improving yourself in those areas, right? Where are you going to get better at, or where do you need to be better at it? And if you can't get better at it, maybe you got to hire someone to do that thing. In that case, right, to help you grow. But
seems like you got the camera problem again.
I think we might be a little frozen.
You're gonna have to hold a monologue for a couple seconds.
I think that's a really good point around getting into like the difference for marketing, sales, and any kind of like training investment that you do make. Though ultimately, it's going to sharpen the saw. I know there's that analogy. I don't know if you've heard this one, but 2 lumberjacks, I think, relatively speaking, is where this goes. And one guy takes an hour for lunch every day. The other guy just keeps like working, but the other guy seems to cut more wood. And he asks him what he does one day, and he says, well, I go home and sharpen my axe or saw. And it kind of makes a really good point around like taking the break, or the analogy. So like I said, within companies, you used to be sharpening the saw when you were going for training, just improving and reminding yourself to get better in certain areas, whether that be we took like driver training for a lot of stuff. I used to be in jobs where we used to drive a lot. And it's incredible how those trainings still stick with me to this day. So I'm not sure how the recent trainings or coaching is going to affect things 10 years from now from today's training, so to say, that you're taking, but I think it will. I think things do stick with us a lot longer than we think. And if we did not go and get formal training for it, you wouldn't be getting better at your thing. anyways. So
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. But Stefan, what's the best way for folks to find you? Just to say this out loud on the podcast episode here, but to find your podcast and your services that you guys are working on to date.
Yeah, definitely. So there's actually a couple of changes happening. So I'm in the process of rebranding. But right now you can find us everywhere on social media as Flatout Business. So Flatout comes from rally racing. Flatout, go as fast as we can.
Nice.
So that's my motto for everything, kind of, in business and outside of business. So Flatout Business. Rebranding as Flatout Solutions with the couple things I talked about. So a couple of changes coming. But yeah, you can find me and you can find me under my name on LinkedIn and whatever. Which my LinkedIn profile, that's another thing I recently learned, that it makes sense to invest in LinkedIn profiles, and there's people that are better at that than me. So I'm gonna hire somebody to do that for me and make that a little more professional. So I'm always learning. So yeah, you'll find me somewhere.
Awesome. No, I think that's awesome. I mean, bottom line, we'll be looking up Flatout. I think is the takeaway here to be able to find you, and that's awesome. So thank you so much for being on today, and I'm sure we are going to be connecting again soon in the realm of the marketing and podcast side.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.